First off, I was going to say, because your wife would love if I actually did. The haircut looks handsome, so I'm
Oh,
happy to get your haircut. I
thank
know
you.
she's probably been bugging you about it for a while, so.
I don't look bad. I have to say so myself. I look good. I look good. What's new on the recruiting front? I know you said you have some things to talk about,
Oh, I
Corey.
didn't want to give you any insights. I couldn't give you any sneak peeks. I actually I was talking to one of my old friends from just the sales world in general, and they had a really interesting way that they've been using AI to prep for interviews. And I was like, oh, tell me more. They wanted to make sure that they could be prepared when they were actually doing like a role play interview, because the way that the interview structure was set up is they did like a general fit, like culture fit interview, and then the second interview was like a mock role play discovery call. That's
Mhm.
kind of how they had it set up. And so the individual that I was talking to was saying, like, hey, well, like, I understand what the business does, but like, I don't know how to ask discovery questions yet for this business. So, like, what can I do? And so they pulled up our old friend ChatGPT, and they had a paid edition for ChatGPT, so they can do more customization what they were looking at. And they prompted the bot with like the website of the person, obviously the company, and then like the LinkedIn profile of the person that they were going to speak to,
Oh, so
and they
like they
actually,
made their own GPT.
yeah, just
Oh,
out of that paid $20 a month version of
yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And then with those prompts, they basically trained GBT to be like a candidate that they would talk to, or like a prospect in general. And so they went through and not only did like a mock role play with them where the chat GBT system could actually answer the questions that they had, but after the call, they asked, hey, what feedback or recommendations would you give to me to do this differently for next time? And ChatGPT actually gave them really good insight around areas they could have dug into further, or how they should have changed their questions. When I was working at HubSpot, one of the things that our recruiting team always used to do, which I thought was awesome, is they would meet with candidates to do like role plays before calls. I know, especially in executive search, this is very common, where they'll actually do like training with the candidates that they're going to be speaking to. And so they'll do like a coaching session to prepare them for the interview they're having. Imagine you could prompt an AI bot to help facilitate some of those calls two or three times before you actually have that first conversation with your candidate. So that way, it's not the first time they're ever pitching it. They can have some ideas or experience. They can come to you with more of a polished edition, make best use of both of your times to help prepare themselves for that interview they're actually leading. And I was like, that's a really interesting way that we can start thinking about using something like AI, especially from a candidate side of things to prepare for interviews.
That's interesting because I do hear a lot of our clients that are recruiting firms will talk about like, hey, I gotta prep this candidate for an interview with the hiring manager or like this panel interview. So we're gonna do like a mock and like help them out. That takes a lot of time. If you could kind of extend yourself a little bit by spinning up like a custom GPT for each role that you're sourcing for, and then
Mm-hmm.
give the candidates that you're most excited about that resource, it just makes it easier for them to prepare for the interview. I've seen those memes on like TikTok and whatever about you're getting asked a question and then you have like an AI beside you and it's telling you what you should answer in real time. Obviously, like that's probably not great, but what are your thoughts? Like how should recruiters be thinking about the use of AI on the candidate side? The good, the bad, the ugly.
My personal opinion is the things that can help you prepare is a great thing, right? A lack of preparation for anything you're doing is just a recipe for failure. Like that's plain and simple. Now, I very much disagree with having AI prompting you on a call for how to interview better, because how can you guarantee that that's actually going to be used inside of the job function itself? Now, that could change. Who knows? Like 10 years ago, thinking about using AI even like this, we probably just said, Josh, you're crazy.
Yep.
Like it's insane how it's moving. So who knows how that could change in the future? Maybe there'll be a day where me as a salesperson actually has like an AI bot whispering in my ear instead of my sales manager on a cold call or something like that. I hated that feature
We
anyways.
had an interview for our internal candidates recently, and they had an earpiece, and we caught it, but that's already happening. That's already here. I even talked to some other folks that they try to find ways to like get the person's IP address so that they can verify that they're in the location that they say that they're in. So it's getting wild. I know there's also a lot of like application automation tools. Have you heard about those?
Yeah, tell me more.
Candidates are using AI tools to automatically apply for roles that somewhat fit a set of criteria that they set for them
Mhm.
automatically. So rather than them going on like LinkedIn jobs and like going through the different roles that are available, determining if one might be a good fit, and then actually manually applying for it, they just have this bot in the background that's applying to like every single role. And then based on the interview requests that they get, they'll be like, oh, do I actually want to take this interview or not? So I think there's going to be some big challenges that are presented for recruiting and hiring based on the candidate side using AI in both ways that are morally okay, like preparation, versus morally questionable, which is like just mass applying to like every single job posting using like a script. There's ways to kind of screen that stuff out. Obviously, we'll be able to fill out like text fields, but it can't do like a voice recording today. So
Yeah.
adding like a voice recording or like a video recording to your screening questionnaire, your initial application form, can really help you cut down on like that noise, which will 10x your candidate base in a
Yeah.
bad.
Any elements that we can use to get a better understanding of the candidate that we're speaking to before we have a chance to talk to them, I think is a huge advantage, right? Like we've already been using systems like AI for resume screening for years. And we've all heard the horror stories about how little that actually works. But I think the more information that we can help provide, especially when we're looking to see how can we streamline processes, the easier it is to use systems like an AI just to help prioritize information. Because I think the biggest application around using AI, especially if we're looking at it from like screening process, because I know we were talking about that example, is that we should never fully rely on the AI to actually shortlist the candidates for us. It should be how do you prioritize the candidates? Like using it as a way to say, based on what generally creates a great candidate for us, here's where I'd start in that list of 10,000 people that just applied for your role. Instead of saying, here's 10,000 people, let's just pick a number and start there and we'll kind of go through it after the fact. Right? That's just inefficient in any way.
I think there's some candidates that don't use those AI automation tools to like mass apply that are sitting here listening to us going like, man, I have to fill out all these applications manually right now. And now you're telling me that all these recruiting firms and companies are going to start adding more tests and more like hectic things that I need to do to apply to a role that I don't even know if I'm going to have a 1% chance of hearing back on. It is a really interesting dynamic because there's a point of like, I want to create a frictionless application process so those high performers take the time to actually apply and I get an opportunity to chat with them. But on the other hand, you want to add enough friction so that you're kind of vetting some people out that are using these tools. It's an interesting balance. I honestly do not know how it's going to be resolved.
And I also don't think there's ever going to be a perfect mix of it. If I look at my own career and see how I got to where I am today, it was because I knew somebody from high school that I was ended up going out for beers with who was working at the first company and said, "Hey, you should apply." So I had a referral to get in there. Because I guarantee that my experience stocking shelves at a pet's food store and doing before and after school care with kids or selling t-shirts was probably not enough to get into tech sales as off my initial resume. And it was only because at the time I ended up taking a competitive deal selling t-shirts from Oktoberfest. Fun fact, Kitchener, Ontario has the second biggest Oktoberfest in the world behind Germany. And so I ended up taking the t-shirt order from that first vendor to us. And the VP of sales at the company I was working for, Vidyard, thought it was awesome. But again, I would have never had that opportunity just because of my general stocking shelves at a cat food store before I had started there as well. And so there's always that mix of how do we stand out? Because I know you and I have had some phenomenal candidates in the past who've gone above and beyond inside of the interview process and we're like, hey, we need to give this person a chance. And they killed it after. But it's never always the case. And so again, there's never a perfect balance.
I agree. Like my first job was like an application. I applied to the same company 3 times. Third time, I actually got an interview and got the job. But then beyond that, it's all been like network hires. Like more and more companies are remote now. We started our careers all in office.
Yeah.
Curious to see how that will impact folks' ability to like move fast up the ranks. Maybe it will accelerate it because
Mhm.
it's so results driven now. Maybe it will make it slower. I don't know. There's a lot shifting, that's for
Well,
sure.
there's also a lot of really interesting dynamics because I think it really depends on like the company size that you look at. Because if we look at more established companies, they are tend to be, again, generalization here, but they're seeming to be the ones who are also looking to bring roles back in office because they're already paying for the office space. But if we look at our experience in sales, like a cold calling role, yeah, those are tend to be individuals who need a little bit more support on a daily basis to stay focused on the task at hand. And so those tend to be some of those roles that get to be in office. I personally think remote work could just become like a benefit that top performers can have because they've proven that they can actually be accountable enough to their own performance to make sure that they can actually do what they need to do. There's so many studies out there that are showing that like individuals who work remotely are not only more productive, unfortunately they work longer too because it's so easy just to run back down to my basement and toss my blanket on and get back on a sales call versus always having to be in an office. It might just depend on the stage of company that an individual is looking to start at, but I do think it's going to cause it to be very results driven, which I think is actually a very good thing. Because nobody likes to work at an organization that only hires the people that the hiring managers liked. A very big example inside of the Canada region out of BlackBerry. They said one of the biggest reasons that that company failed is they didn't hire enough diverse talent, especially on a senior executive level. It was only the internal hires. Now, I don't have the full context. Obviously, I never worked at BlackBerry when I was there, but it's like maybe that was one of the reasons why it didn't become as successful as it could, is because of they only hired internally based on relationships versus performance based and bringing external people in too.
And it's all over the map. Like we posted one role and there was 1,000 candidates that applied in the first 2 days. We posted another role, there's like 30, right? So it's really all over the map. And that's using the same structure of like an application form, like nothing that's too crazy different. So it will be interesting. Maybe on our next show we'll do some predictions for the next 6 months, 12 months,
Oh,
and then we'll revisit after and see how wrong wrong
oh.
we were.
I was just saying, I'll have to take the weekend to study up and see what I'm
Yeah.
going to predict here.
But no, I think it's really interesting to start seeing more and more on the candidate side how AI is being used, the good, the bad, the ugly. As always, Josh, thanks so much for chatting with me today, and we'll be back next week.
See you next week, Ryan.
Bye.